Hello and welcome to my first reading wrap-up of 2026. Genuinely, how is it the end of January already? I feel like January is normally a never-ending month, and yet this year it just feels like it's gone so fast. But I have had a really good reading month this month. I've even found a couple of favourites. So grab a cup of tea and join me as I tell you what I read in January and what I thought of it. So the first book I finished in 2026 was Natural Beauty by Ling Huang. This was like reading a Black Mirror episode. It follows a talented pianist who leaves her Chinese piano teacher parents to go and study at a fancy piano school in New York and start a new life. But a tragic turn of events mean that her plans change and she ends up working at a crazy self-care, beauty and wellness store that's full of like weird, innovative products that can solve any insecurity you have. If you think of Goop, the company by Gwyneth Paltrow, it's kind of that vibe, but weirder. This was a really good book. I read both of this author's works over the past couple of months and I love them both. I thought there was so much about the intersection between technology and society, which I find really interesting. And it brought up a lot of thoughts about like the beauty industry and what is in all these products that we are like influenced to buy. And do we care what's in these products? Like, is ignorance bliss in this case? Until recently, I didn't think I was a fan of horror in books or films. But I actually think I do love horror when it's written like this. I found it fun and interesting. I found it also terrifying and unsettling, but also it had all this commentary on like capitalism and the beauty industry and the immigrant experience. And I just felt like being able to put all three of those things into one book was just really skillful. I feel like the author trusted her readers. She didn't over-explain things, although there were a lot of shocking twists that were quite really dark and twisted. They're not just there to be shocking, they actually contribute to the story. And that was just a great start to the year in terms of reading. So I then picked up all three books of Hiroko Oyamada's. So we have The Factory, The Hole, and Weasels in the Attic. These are her three books that have been translated into English. And I read these for a reading vlog a couple of weeks ago, and I talked about them in a lot of detail. So I won't dive too deep again. I'll just tell you a brief synopsis. So The Factory follows three characters who have each taken jobs working in this massive factory that is like the size of a major city. They're all doing fairly mindless and meaningless work. One is shredding paper, one is studying moss, but with like no real reasoning or project like goals in mind, and one proofreads documents. And none of them really know why they're doing what they're doing or what the factory actually does or produces or makes or anything like that. And things just start getting weirder. And yeah, I found it quite difficult to read at first. But once I got into it, I thought it was really impactful. I found myself thinking about this one for days after I'd finished it. Then we have The Hole. No, we don't. Then we have The Hole. So this follows a woman whose husband within his job has been transferred to the countryside, and they move to a new town where his family are from. So he's quickly consumed in his job and isn't really very present, whereas she is now unemployed and really doesn't have any pressure or financial stress that's causing her to feel like she needs to get a job. And she feels like this is something she should be happy about. But she actually finds herself sort of losing her mind a little bit. She loses her sense of self and then she falls in a hole and weird things start happening again. The writing I found a lot easier in this one. I found it really immersive. Like it's only about 100 pages, but I was so sucked in and like it was a real good atmosphere. And again, it gave me a lot of thoughts afterwards. And then finally we have Weasels in the Attic. So I liked this one the least out of the three. This is made up of 3 short stories. They're all connected by the same set of characters. So in the first story, there's 2 friends that meet up in the back of a fish shop to catch up. Then the same 2 friends are talking on the phone, catching up. And one of them has moved to a house in the countryside that is suffering from a weasel infestation. And then finally, there's a dinner party with the two friends and their wives during a snowstorm. And that is the one that gets really weird. I liked the themes, but I feel like the themes are very much surrounding motherhood, and it's very focused on sort of struggles of women, but I just didn't like how it was played out. It didn't have that dreaminess and weirdness that I got from the other two books. So it didn't have that atmosphere. And I think maybe it just didn't really work for me, this one. So I have a lot of books on my Kindle and I often just mood read them. And so I picked this one up kind of on a whim, mainly because I thought it looked a little bit sapphic from the front. It wasn't, not to ruin it, but it wasn't. This is called The Lady Upstairs by Jessie Elland. It's about a servant called Anne who works in a sort of big house and she wants to be, her biggest wish is to be the maid for the lady upstairs, but she finds things aren't quite as idyllic up there as she thought they might be, and in reality things are actually quite twisted and dark. I didn't love this book. I found the first half really tough to get through. I found it really slow. It was really gruesome to read. Like, I feel like it was trying to be shocking and trying to be as disgusting as possible. I guess the idea was to like show the difference between the upstairs, which is like clean and lovely and perfect, and the downstairs, which is like a real like hell. But it was just a bit too much. Like, it was a lot of gruesome descriptions. It was a lot of like very vivid writing. But I kept pushing through because I did want to see what happened. And I did enjoy the second half more. I thought there was like some really beautiful prose. But even in the second half that I was enjoying more, I just found like some of it was just too much, to the point where the writing was so flowery that I didn't really understand what was going on. And that was my main issue with the ending. I do like an ending that's quite open and leaves you a bit like confused and like trying to think about what actually happened. But this was so open-ended and so unsatisfying. And I genuinely just didn't have a clue what I was even supposed to think. Like, I couldn't even tell you what, like, the possibilities of what could have happened. Because, I mean, maybe that's just me, but I just didn't understand. It was like a fever dream book, which isn't a bad thing, but it was just too far from reality. Like, I just needed something to hold on to. And I didn't have it in the end. It wasn't a winner for me. But then I moved on to another Kindle book and I was really excited for this one, and luckily it lived up to the hype for me. So this was The Midnight Timetable by Bora Chung. I had so much fun reading this. It's a book of ghost stories, but each story is linked because they are in the world of the same setting. So this setting is a research institute that houses and cares for haunted objects or like creepy objects, and you're following a nighttime security guard. And it was just so creepy and so unsettling, but so fun. At the same time, it managed to be also a bit emotional and have quite a lot of social commentary woven into these bizarre stories about like ghost sheep and like haunted shoes. It managed to be silly, goofy while also having like something to say. And I thought having the stories linked together by this like haunted museum research institute was just such a great way to build this world, but still get to tell like quite disjointed stories. I just thought it was really clever and I really enjoyed it. We then went downhill a little bit again. I picked up Mr. Darwin's Gardener by Christina Colson. So I really enjoy picking up the Pyrene publishers' works. If I do see them in independent bookshops or wherever, I do like to pick them up because so far, there hasn't been one I haven't enjoyed until this one, unfortunately. So I picked this up kind of on a whim because it's a Finnish translation and I hadn't read anything from Finland for my reading a translated book from every country in the world challenge. I also was quite intrigued because of the Darwin reference, and I'm a conservation scientist, and I was just looking for some sort of themes of evolution or nature or biology or just something down those lines. I did some research after reading this, and it was part of a series from 2013, and the set of books in this series were depicting pivotal moments in history, but from like a domestic setting. So this one is depicting the publication of On the Origin of Species, but from a small town in Kent where Darwin is living. But Darwin isn't really a character in the book. He's just sort of this overarching figure. And you're following all the villagers, literally the whole town, the whole cast of villagers, as they, one, gossip, judge each other, and then also grapple with this revelation that evolution and science are kind of contradicting religion, I guess. There isn't a whole lot of plot, which isn't intrinsically a bad thing. But my main problem with this was the writing style. It was very experimental. It's a mix of past and present tense, as well as first person narration, third person narration, and like a plural narration where like all the villagers talk at once. But all these different narrations flip constantly, like even within a few lines of each other, which conceptually sounds quite fun, but in reality I just was quite frustrated and confused as I was reading it. And it was just a little bit boring. And something being boring and not easy to read is just a bad combination. So it just wasn't a winner for me, unfortunately. Similarly, for my little series where I'm trying to read a translated book for every country in the world, I picked up a book from Turkey this month. So this is Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahattin Ali. This was a really cool experience. I really enjoyed this. I don't own many Penguin classics, like the Penguin Black classics, but I really enjoyed the introduction at the front. So it gives you like a bit of background and context of the author. And especially when it's an author that I didn't know anything about going into this, it was really interesting to get that. It turns out Sabahattin Ali was a huge political activist. He was imprisoned many times. He was also murdered. And although the context of his murder is unknown to this day, is thought to be because of his views and his like writings. Almost all of his writings were political and like either banned or condemned. But this was his only book that was more of just like a light-hearted romance with no real sort of agenda to it. And yet this is his most famous. And I just find that really, really interesting. So yeah, this follows an old man who's on his sort of in his sick bed, and he's telling his friend about his true love from when he was a young man. So he's a young man, he's quite socially awkward, he's a bit annoying, and he moves to Berlin on his own, and he sees this painting. It's a self-portrait of a woman in a fur coat, and he falls in love. He becomes obsessed with this painting, and eventually he is able to meet the painter. They go on to have a very interesting, complex relationship. Maria is the painter. She is the Madonna in a fur coat, and I thought she was amazing. She's a very complex, very interesting character. I loved some of the things she said. She had a lot of thoughts. The like narrator character I didn't love. I found him quite hard to connect to at all. But overall, I did find this a really good read. And it was one of those reads where you know what happens at the end, but you don't know how. And you sort of spend the whole book like hoping that somehow the ending won't be the ending that you know is going to happen, if that makes sense. Like you hope something will change it even though you know it can't. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. And it was exciting to read something from a new country again. I then picked up a book that I still to this day don't know how to rate. I really am conflicted about this. So this was One Yellow Eye by Leigh Redford. There were parts of this I loved, and then there were parts of this I really didn't love. And I don't know how to break that down. This follows a cancer research scientist called Kester. And she is in the wake of a zombie virus outbreak in London. All the zombies have been rounded up and killed. The virus is theoretically contained now, but no one knows where the virus came from or how it got started or anything about it. So this underground research project is set up to sort of study the virus. And Kester is given the opportunity to help find the cure in this research project. And she jumps at the chance because she is very desperate to find a cure because her husband was bitten and she has him tied up in her spare room and is keeping him alive with the hope that she will be able to find a cure. Now that is a really good premise. So I had the UK cover on my Kindle, and I think the UK cover gives like a silly, goofy vibe. Like this is fun, this is silly, this is like hijinks and fun, like zombie chaos kind of thing. It is not silly, goofy. It is very dark. It's actually really, really sad, this book is. It's deeply about like grief and loss and a woman just like losing herself, but it just really wasn't what I was expecting. And it was a lot. It was quite a difficult read, to be honest. So we'll start with the things I didn't like so we can end on a positive. So it felt quite unrealistic at times. I cannot say I'm an expert on underground secret government projects, but Some of the things Kester manages to get away with just seem just not possible. It's quite chosen one vibes, like Kester is the one who discovers everything. She makes all the revelations. She fixes all the like issues they're having. And I just, again, she has quite a lot of colleagues that are arguably more knowledgeable than she is. And I'm just like, again, a bit unrealistic. There's a lot of bits that just seemed like left as loose ends. The author had other ideas and and characters were introduced, but then just never heard from again. And it just felt like there was maybe too much to it. So maybe it was a bit long for me. And then also there is explicit animal testing on a monkey, which although I understand animal testing is a thing, I did find it really horrible to read about, and I didn't like that at all. And then some of the things I really liked. So I felt the second half got a lot more gripping and like fast paced, and I read that a lot quicker. And I thought it was really well researched in that the academic bits I actually really liked. I genuinely felt like I was learning stuff about virology. I do think the author did create a like feeling of tension and claustrophobia and panic and desperation really well. Like I did feel like we were with Kester and feeling everything she was feeling. And like the horror elements and the tension in the second half was just really good. Like I just couldn't put it down in the second half. So overall, I finished it. I didn't hate it, but I just kind of felt sad, and not like in a cathartic sad. It was just like really sad, the book was. It was just like, oh, okay then. If you've read that one, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts, because I really am conflicted. And then we come to my last book of the month, and this was my favourite. This is We Hexed the Moon by Molly Hall Seeley. I bought this without knowing anything about it. I just picked it up and I read the inside cover, which I'll read to you now. 4 friends about to go to college accidentally on purpose summon the moon from the night sky. Now it's turned up in one of their bedrooms as an angry, sarcastic, all-powerful young woman demanding they make amends. And I thought, yeah, you're coming home with me. So this book centres on 4 friends, as I said. They're spending their last summer together as they're all sort of finishing high school and going off to different like universities or travelling or whatever. And then one afternoon in the summer, they perform this ritual to hex the moon. And to their surprise, it works, with the moon disappearing from the sky. The whole world is like, what the hell is going on? Like, everyone's like, where the frick's the moon gone? And the moon appears in one of their bedrooms as a sort of in the form of a young, irritated and slightly cruel woman. So yeah, I read the first 16 pages and thought, oh my God, yeah, this is it. I love this. And luckily the rest of it was just as good. It is almost like 2 books in one, in which we have the first book that is funny and zany, and it's these 4 girls trying to sort out this moon issue. It's got super Gen Z humour, which I was a bit worried I was going to find quite cringy when I first started it, but actually I genuinely found it really funny. There's loads of cultural references and all this like arguing between the girls, and it's really funny, and I loved that bit. But alongside that story, you also have this like really intimate portrayal of the experience of girlhood. We have like insights into grief and growing up and sexuality and religion, and like those deeply intense friendships you have as a young teenage girl. And I just really thought it perfectly captured how a friendship feels in high school, with like the bickering and the teasing, but also like a genuine deep bond. So I like saved one of the quotes. I just love books about this feeling. So it goes, that's what being best friends felt like. That's what being a girl and having best friends felt like. Cannibalism. All of you at the feast and of the feast. All of you taking parts of each other without even realising it. Becoming each other as you became yourself. Jealous of the pieces of yourself that others took, but proud of them too. Proud that they'd been deemed worthy and edible. Proud when you were closer to being fully consumed than anyone else, but also furious that anyone else would dare to take any piece of you. The pieces you'd grown so painstakingly that you'd put together from all the things you stole from everybody else. You were only you as long as nobody else was, but of course everybody was everybody when you were best friends like this. There was no you, there was no them, there was only one person, one entity, breathing. And I just, love that. I just love those vibes. I will say, slight trigger warning, there's no quotation marks in the dialogue. And I know some people hate that. I loved Normal People. I loved this. I don't think the quotation marks really bother me. But just in case that is a hatred of yours, then that's fine. But yeah, in general, I just thought it was just a really unique way of doing a coming of age story. And it genuinely does feel like a new favourite of mine. So there we have it. So I read 10 books this month, which I'm so happy with. And although there was a few duds in there, like mostly I'm so happy with what I read. It was a really great reading month. And I hope you had a great reading month too. And if you have any thoughts on any of these books, please do let me know, because I love discussing thoughts on books. That's why I'm here. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.